I was there when the generals laughed. I was there when they stopped. My name is Benedictus Vaughan, and for 31 years I served as a scribe, militant in the retinue of Lord General Castorius Malavon, commander of the Varenian Castellan host. I recorded his orders. I documented his campaigns. I transcribed his victory speeches and his private correspondence, his tactical genius and his growing heresies. I was the shadow behind his throne, the quill that gave permanence to his words, and in the end, I was the witness to his annihilation. They will find this testimony in the ruins of what was once Fortress Absolom, burned into the stones by my own hand, using a thermal stylus I salvaged from the wreckage. I have perhaps an hour before the wounds take me. The sisters left me alive, I think because they recognized what I was. A chronicler, a keeper of truth. They wanted someone to survive who could tell the galaxy what happens to those who mock the Emperor's faith. So I will tell you. The Varenian Castellan host was once one of the most decorated Imperial Guard formations in the Segmentum Tempestus. 18 worlds conquered. 3 crusades fought to completion. Our banners hung in the Hall of Martyrs on Terror itself, or so the Lord General claimed. I never verified this. I never questioned anything Castorius Malavon told me, not until it was far too late. He was a beautiful man, in the way that power makes men beautiful. Tall and lean, with silver hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble, untouched by the decades of warfare that had aged everyone around him. There were rumors about this, of course, juvenat treatments, forbidden surgeries, pacts made in the darkness between stars. I dismissed them as jealousy. The Lord General had enemies among the aristocracy, rivals who resented his rise from minor nobility to supreme command. Of course they would spread such lies. I believed in him. Emperor, forgive me, I believed in everything he said. The heresy began slowly, as all heresies do. Small comments during strategy sessions. Observations about the inefficiency of the ecclesiarchy. Questions about why we tithe so much to priests who contributed nothing to the war effort. These seemed reasonable to me at the time. We were fighting a grinding campaign against secessionists on the Agri, world of Kalos Prime, and supplies were short. The regimental confessors demanded resources for their chapels while soldiers went hungry. Was it not sensible to question such priorities? Then the questions became statements. Then the statements became policies. The first confessor who disappeared was Father Octavian Thresh, a minor figure, elderly and ineffective, assigned to the 44th Infantry Brigade. One morning he simply was not there. The Lord General's adjutant explained that Father Thresh had been reassigned to another unit. I recorded this in the daily logs without thought. A week later, 2 more confessors vanished, then 5. Then the remaining priests were summoned to a meeting with the Lord General and emerged hours later with faces like ash, stripped of their vestments and their authority, sent to serve as common stretcher bearers in the medical corps. I should have reported this. I should have found a way to contact the ecclesiarchy, the commissariat, someone with the authority to intervene. But I had served Castorius Malavon for 18 years at that point. I had watched him win impossible victories. I had seen him stand against greenskin hordes and dark elder raiders and rebel armies that outnumbered us 10 to 1. He had saved my life personally during the siege of Vetara, pulling me from a collapsing bunker with his own hands. How could such a man be wrong? The heat of Kalos Prime was oppressive, a wet blanket of humidity that never lifted. I remember that heat constantly during those months. The way it made every movement an effort. The way it blurred the line between waking and sleeping. The sky was the color of spoiled milk, choked with agricultural runoff from the vast grain processing facilities that covered the planet's surface. We breathed that air constantly, thick with particulates and chemical additives. Perhaps it affected our judgment. Perhaps it made us susceptible to ideas we would have rejected in cleaner circumstances. The Lord General began holding councils with his senior staff, and these councils grew stranger as the campaign progressed. He spoke of efficiency. He spoke of rationality. He spoke of stripping away the superstitions that hobbled the Imperium's military might. The Emperor, he explained, was a great man, perhaps the greatest who ever lived, but he was still just a man. To worship him as a god was to misunderstand his legacy entirely. The Emperor had been a scientist, an engineer of human potential. He had wanted humanity to evolve beyond primitive religious thinking. The ecclesiarchy had betrayed his vision. I transcribed every word of these speeches. My hand did not tremble, my faith did not waver. Because I had no faith to waver, not really. I had grown up in the administratum warrens of a hive world, where religion was just another form of social control. Another way for the powerful to keep the masses in line. I said my prayers because everyone said their prayers. I made the sign of the Aquila because refusal meant investigation. But in my heart, I had always wondered if it was all just theatre. Castorius Malavon gave voice to those doubts, and I loved him for it. The turning point came 6 months into the Kalos campaign. We had cornered the last major secessionist army in the Valdris Basin, a fertile river valley that produced nearly 30% of the planet's grain output. The rebels numbered perhaps 80,000, poorly armed and desperate. Victory was inevitable. The Lord General called his commanders together in the great pavilion that served as our mobile headquarters, and he proposed something unprecedented. We would not simply defeat the rebels, we would incorporate them. The secessionist leaders had originally broken from the Imperium over tithe disputes, he explained. They objected to the percentage of their harvest claimed by the administratum and the additional levy demanded by the ecclesiarchy for the maintenance of shrine worlds. These were rational grievances, were they not? Excessive taxation weakened productive capacity. The rebels were not heretics or chaos worshippers, they were businessmen who had made a logical economic calculation. If we offered them terms, reduced tithes, exemption from ecclesiarchal levies, representation in local governance, they would surrender without further bloodshed. We could then use their intact infrastructure to accelerate the pacification of the remaining resistance. The generals agreed unanimously. They had been drinking the Lord General's philosophy for months now. They nodded along as he explained that the Imperium's greatest weakness was its inefficiency, its devotion to tradition over innovation, its insistence on spiritual purity over practical results. The Emperor himself had never demanded worship. The Emperor had wanted a secular Imperium, a galaxy governed by reason and science. The priests had corrupted his vision. The ecclesiarchy was a parasite that weakened humanity. I recorded every word. My hand was steady. My heart was light. Looking back, I understand now that we had already fallen. Not to chaos, not in the way the catechisms described, with daemons and mutation and obvious corruption. We had fallen to something subtler and perhaps more dangerous. We had fallen to pride. We believed we were smarter than the billion saints and martyrs who had given their lives for the imperial faith. We believed we could see through the superstitions that blinded lesser men. We believed we were the vanguard of a new, rational Imperium. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, sent us teachers. The first warning came 3 weeks after we concluded our treaty with the Valdris rebels. A astropathic message arrived from Segmentum Command, terse and formal. The Lord General was summoned to appear before an ecclesiastical tribunal on charges of heresy, apostasy, and the suppression of legitimate imperial religious authority. He was ordered to surrender command immediately and present himself to the nearest shrine world for judgment. Castorius Malevin read the message in front of his assembled staff. Then he laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a bitter laugh. It was genuine amusement, the kind of deep, rolling laughter that comes from absolute certainty in one's own superiority. They send priests to judge generals, he said. They send prayers to counter guns. This is why the Imperium stagnates. This is why we lose worlds faster than we conquer them. Because we let old women in black robes dictate to soldiers. He crumpled the message and dropped it on the floor. Then he issued new orders. The Varenian Castellan host would not surrender. We would fortify Kalos Prime and declare it an independent military governorship, the first of many worlds that would break free from ecclesiarchal tyranny. Other commanders would join us, he was certain. Other rational men who saw through the Church's manipulation. We would spark a reformation that would sweep across the galaxy. I should have run. I should have stolen a shuttle or bribed a supply convoy or simply walked into the wilderness and taken my chances with the local fauna. Instead, I stayed. I believed. I thought we were making history. We made ashes instead. The Sisters of Battle arrived 7 weeks later. I had never seen the Adepta Sororitas in person before. I had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had heard the stories. Women who made themselves into weapons of faith, who could walk through fire and emerge unscorched, who sang hymns while butchering the enemies of the Emperor. I had assumed these were exaggerations, propaganda designed to intimidate the faithful into compliance. The Lord General certainly believed this. He spoke of the sisters with contempt, dismissing them as fanatics who relied on zeal to compensate for their lack of proper military training. They fight with faith, he said, and faith is just another word for ignorance. We fight with superior tactics, superior firepower, superior discipline. Faith cannot stand against artillery. The first planetary defense station reported contact as 0347 local time. 3 vessels had translated from the warp at the system's edge, smaller than standard Imperial Navy cruisers, but moving with unusual speed. Identification signals marked them as belonging to the Order of the Burning Rose, a minor sisterhood operating out of a convent in a neighboring subsector. The Lord General was woken and informed. He ordered standard interception protocols and went back to sleep. By dawn, 2 of our defense stations were silent. The sister ships had not engaged in naval combat. They had launched boarding torpedoes, ceramite, sheathed penetrators that punched through the station's hulls and disgorged their cargo directly into the command centers. The recordings we recovered later showed what happened next. Women in black power armor moving through corridors with inhuman precision, their weapons blazing, their voices raised in hymns that seemed to drown out the screams of the dying. They did not take prisoners. They did not accept surrender. They cleansed each station with fire and faith, and then they continued toward Kalos Prime. The Lord General was not concerned. He had 80,000 soldiers under his command, dug into prepared positions around Fortress Absolom and the surrounding industrial complexes. The sisters could not number more than a few hundred, perhaps 1,000 at most. They would break against our defenses like water against stone. I wanted to believe him. But something had changed in the air that morning. The heat of Kalos Prime felt different somehow, charged with an electricity that made my skin prickle. The sky seemed darker, the clouds heavier, though the weather stations reported no change in atmospheric conditions. The soldiers felt it too. I saw them making the sign of the Aquila when they thought no one was watching, old habits resurfacing despite months of the Lord General's secular philosophy. The sisters made planetfall at noon, their dropships descending through the overcast sky like black tears falling from heaven. They landed 30 kilometers from our outer perimeter, in a region of abandoned grain silos that we had deemed strategically insignificant. The Lord General deployed 2 armored companies to contain them. Confident that the combination of Lemon Russ battle tanks and heavy artillery would overwhelm any infantry force, no matter how fanatical, the armored companies reported contact at 1423. By 1445 they had stopped reporting entirely. I was in the command center when the Vox went silent. The Lord General stood over the tactical display, his silver hair gleaming in the light of the hololithic projectors, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but a flicker of something that did not belong on that marble face. He ordered reconnaissance flights. The pilots reported that the grain silos were burning, columns of black smoke rising into the perpetual overcast, and among the flames they could see shapes moving. Black shapes, singing shapes. The hymns began that night. I do not know how to describe what it was like to hear them. The sisters were still kilometers away, beyond the range of any human voice, but somehow their songs carried across the distance, as if the air itself had become a medium for their faith. The words were high Gothic, ancient and formal, praising the Emperor's glory and promising death to his enemies. They should have been ridiculous. They should have been easy to ignore, background noise to the serious business of military defense. Instead, they burrowed into our minds like parasites. I could not sleep that night. None of us could. The hymns were everywhere, seeping through the walls of Fortress Absolom, echoing in the corridors, drowning out the hum of the generators and the distant rumble of artillery. Soldiers pressed their hands over their ears and wept. Officers screamed at their subordinates to find the source of the sound and silence it. The Lord General paced his quarters like a caged animal, his composure finally beginning to crack. "It's psychological warfare," he insisted, his voice too loud, too sharp. "Vox amplification, sonic projection technology. There's nothing supernatural about it. They're trying to break our morale before the assault." He ordered counter-broadcasts. Military hymns and patriotic anthems blasted from every speaker in the fortress. The sisters singing swallowed them whole. He ordered the Vox systems silenced entirely. The hymns continued, sourceless and inescapable. He ordered soldiers to stuff their ears with cotton and report any man who showed signs of wavering faith. By morning, 18 soldiers had killed themselves. 53 more had vanished from their posts, and the search parties found them kneeling in empty chambers, their lips moving in silent prayer, their eyes fixed on something none of us could see. The Lord General had them executed for desertion. I recorded the orders. My hand trembled. The assault came on the third day. They emerged from the smoke of the burning grain fields like angels of death, their black armor gleaming with reflected firelight, their weapons singing with each discharge. There were perhaps 300 of them, a fraction of our forces, and they advanced into the teeth of our prepared defenses without hesitation or fear. Our gunners opened fire with everything we had. Las beams and autocannon rounds and mortar shells rained down on that black tide, enough firepower to level a hive spire. The sisters walked through it. I watched from the command center as the tactical display became a chronicle of impossible events. Heavy weapons emplacements fell silent, their crews dead or scattered. Tank squadrons reported contact and then vanished from the network. Infantry companies that had held the line against rebel armies, 10 times their size, broke and ran within minutes of engaging the sisters. And through it all, the hymns continued, growing louder as the Adepta Sororitas advanced, swelling into a crescendo of praise that seemed to shake the very foundations of the fortress. The Lord General committed our reserves. 5,000 soldiers, the finest veterans of the Varenian Castellan host, thrown against the sisters in a desperate counter-attack. I watched the battle unfold on the displays, and I understood for the first time what faith truly meant. It was not ignorance, it was not superstition, it was certainty, absolute and unshakable, that transformed ordinary women into something more than human. The sisters fought like they could not die, because in their hearts they believed that death in the Emperor's service was not an ending but a reward. They moved through our formations like flames through dry grass, and wherever they passed, they left only corpses and converts. Yes, converts. I saw it happen on the live feeds, soldiers throwing down their weapons and falling to their knees, their hands raised in supplication, their voices joining the hymns. The Lord General's philosophy had seemed so compelling in the abstract, so logical and rational. But logic and rationality meant nothing when you were facing a woman in black armor, who smiled as your lasgun bolts bounced off her blessed ceramite, who walked through your artillery barrages untouched, who killed your comrades with flame and fury while singing praises to a god you had been taught to dismiss as myth. Faith is not a weakness. Faith is a weapon, and the sisters wielded it like master swordsmen. By nightfall the outer perimeter had collapsed. By midnight, the sisters had breached the fortress walls. By dawn, they were in the corridors, and the hymns were so loud that I could feel them in my bones, shaking loose every doubt and fear I had suppressed for years. I found myself praying. For the first time since childhood, I prayed, not because I was afraid of death, but because I was afraid I would die without ever having believed in anything real. The Lord General's philosophy seemed hollow now, a thin shell of intellectual pride that crumbled at the first touch of genuine conviction. I had spent my life serving a man who mocked the Emperor's faith, and now the Emperor's faithful had come to collect the debt. The final battle took place in the great hall of Fortress Absalom, beneath banners that had flown over 100 conquered worlds. The Lord General had gathered his surviving command staff, perhaps 200 officers and soldiers, the last remnants of an army that had numbered nearly 100,000. They formed a defensive circle around their leader, their weapons raised, their faces blank with terror and exhaustion. Castorius Malavon stood in the center of that circle, and for the first time I saw him as he truly was. Not a visionary, Not a reformer, just a man old and frightened, whose certainties had been stripped away like rotted cloth. His silver hair was matted with sweat, his marble features had cracked and sagged. He held a bolt pistol in one trembling hand, and he pointed it at the great doors as they began to buckle under the impact of power weapons. "Faith cannot stand against artillery," he had said, but artillery was gone, and faith remained. The doors exploded inward, and the sisters poured through. I do not remember the details of the massacre. I remember impressions, fragments, moments frozen in fire and blood. The canoness leading the assault, her power sword blazing with white flame, her voice rising above the hymns in a prayer of thanksgiving for the opportunity to purge the faithless. The sisters moving through our defensive formation like reapers through wheat, each strike precise and economical, each kill accompanied by a blessing. The screams of the dying mixing with the songs of the righteous until they became indistinguishable. I remember the Lord General's final moments. He stood alone in the center of the hall, surrounded by the corpses of his officers, and he fired his bolt pistol at the approaching canoness until the magazine was empty. The rounds detonated harmlessly against her armor, leaving scorch marks but no damage. She walked toward him slowly, almost gently, and he threw the empty weapon at her in a gesture of impotent defiance. "You're nothing but fanatics," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word, "slaves to a dead god." The emperor was just a man. He never wanted worship. He never wanted any of this. The canoness stopped before him. She was tall, nearly as tall as he was, with a face that might have been beautiful if it had ever known doubt or mercy. Her eyes were the color of fire, literally burning with an inner light that could not have been natural. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost kind, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "The emperor sits upon the golden throne," she said. "He has sat there for 10,000 years, his body dying, his spirit fighting eternally to protect humanity from the darkness. He gave everything for us. Everything. And you stand here, in your fortress built with the resources he provided, defended by soldiers he created, breathing air on a world he saved from extinction, and you call him just a man." She reached out and placed her armored hand on his shoulder, almost tenderly. The Lord General flinched as if her touch burned him. "The Emperor loved humanity," she continued. "He loved us so much that he sacrificed his own immortality to save us. He loved us so much that he endured 10,000 years of agony to light the Astronomicon and guide our ships through the warp. He loved us so much that he asked nothing in return except that we remember, that we believe, that we have faith." Her grip tightened. Castorius Malavan gasped in pain. "You took that faith from your soldiers. You taught them to scoff at sacrifice. You taught them to mock devotion. You taught them that love was weakness and belief was ignorance." Her voice hardened, the softness giving way to steel. "And in doing so, you left them defenseless, not against our bolters and our flamers, but against the truth. When faith confronted them, they had nothing to stand on. They collapsed because you had hollowed them out." The Lord General tried to speak, tried to offer some defense or justification, but the canoness did not give him the chance. Her power sword ignited, white flame running along its length, and she drove it through his chest with a single, economical thrust. Castorius Malavan looked down at the blade piercing his heart, and I saw something in his eyes that might have been understanding. Then the canoness twisted the sword, and he was gone. The hall fell silent. The hymns stopped. For a moment, there was only the crackle of flames and the soft moans of the dying. Then the canoness turned, and her burning eyes found me. I was cowering behind an overturned table, my scribe's robe soaked with blood that was not my own, my hands pressed against my ears, as if I could block out the memory of what I had witnessed. She walked toward me, and I thought I was about to die. I hoped I was about to die. Death seemed infinitely preferable to living with the knowledge of what I had been part of. But the canoness did not kill me. She stood over me, her shadow falling across my face, and she studied me with those terrible, beautiful eyes. "You are the chronicler," she said. It was not a question. I nodded, unable to speak. "You recorded his heresies. You transcribed his blasphemies. You gave permanence to his lies." I nodded again, and tears streamed down my face. "Then you will record the truth," She reached down and pulled me to my feet with surprising gentleness. You will write what happened here. You will write how faith overcame pride, how devotion conquered doubt, how the Emperor's servants answered blasphemy with fire. You will write it, and you will believe it, and perhaps in the believing you will find redemption. She released me and turned away, her sisters falling into formation around her. They marched from the hall in perfect order, their hymns resuming, and they left me alone among the dead. I have done as she commanded. I have written the truth. It has taken me hours, scratching these words into the stone with a thermal stylus, my hands shaking, my wounds seeping, my vision blurring. But I have written it, and in the writing I have found something I thought I had lost forever. The Lord General taught me that faith was weakness, that belief was ignorance, that the rational mind needed no gods. But rationality could not explain what I saw in that hall. Logic could not account for women who walked through artillery unscathed, who moved faster than physics should allow, who burned with a light that came from somewhere beyond the material universe. The sisters did not fight like fanatics. They fought like instruments of a will greater than their own. They fought like the hands of a god. I believe now. Emperor, forgive me for the years I did not believe. Emperor, forgive me for the lies I transcribed and the heresies I enabled. Emperor, forgive me for the soldiers who died defending a philosophy of emptiness, who fell because I helped strip away the armor of their faith. The sisters have departed. Fortress Absalom burns around me. I can feel the heat through the walls, smell the smoke seeping through the cracks. Soon the flames will reach this chamber, and I will become ash like everything else Castorius Malavan built. But these words will remain. Burned into stone, they will survive the flames. Someone will find them. Someone will read them, and perhaps in reading, they will understand what I learned in the final hours of my life. Faith is not a weakness. Faith is not ignorance. Faith is the recognition that there are forces in this universe greater than our understanding. That meaning exists beyond what we can measure and quantify. That love and sacrifice and devotion are not evolutionary accidents, but reflections of something divine. The Emperor may have been a man once, long ago, but 10,000 years of agony and sacrifice have made him something more. He is the light in the darkness, the hope in the despair, the faith that sustains a million souls across a galaxy of horror. The traitor generals scoffed at that faith. They laughed at the priests and mocked the prayers and dismissed the Emperor as just another dead tyrant. They believed their guns and their tactics and their rational philosophy would protect them from anything. Then the sisters of battle came, and they learned the truth. I am dying now. The blood loss is too great, the wounds too deep. But I am not afraid. For the first time in my life I am not afraid, because I know, with absolute certainty, that the Emperor is real. He sits upon the golden throne, and he watches over his children, and he sends his angels to purge those who would lead them astray. I was one of those who led them astray. I was complicit in heresy. I enabled blasphemy, and yet the canonists spared my life so that I could write these words. Perhaps that was mercy. Perhaps that was penance. Perhaps, in the Emperor's infinite wisdom, my sins can be redeemed through testimony. I hope so, I pray so. The fires are close now. I can feel them on my skin, not as pain but as purification. The smoke fills my lungs, and it tastes like incense, like the sacred censers that swing in the great cathedrals I never visited, never believed in, never understood. I understand now. Ave Imperator, Ave Imperator, Ave Imperator. This is the testimony of Benedictus Vaughan, scribe militant, witness to the fall of the Varenian Castellan host, believer at the last. May the Emperor forgive me. May the Emperor protect you. May the Emperor's faith burn bright across the darkness of this galaxy, a fire that no heretic can extinguish, a light that no doubt can dim. The sisters taught me this truth, and I pass it to you with my final breath. Believe, and you will never be alone. Scoff, and the flames will find you. The Emperor protects.